Hey, what's up? It's Mark at alchemist.camp, where we learn Elixir and Phoenix by building things. Today we're going to continue building the simple Phoenix LiveView app that we're several episodes into. So if you're new to that series or new to Alchemist Camp, go to alchemist.camp/episodes and scroll down to the setup episode. Start from there and it'll make much more sense. What we're doing today is we're going to do a bit of styling and install some new fonts or a new font, add the logo to the site, and start working on the podcast pages. So let's start by going to the assets directory, and then we're going to pull some file version numbers that I have prepared ahead of time, since there are a number of annoying conflicts. If you upgrade Webpack without the Webpack CLI, you get some pretty cryptic error messages. So the safest thing to do if you're watching this is just go to the assets package.json and use the exact same version numbers that I am. We're going to upgrade Webpack to 4.42.1, Webpack CLI to 3.3.11. Then we'll install Node Sass, which is a prerequisite for Sass Loader, which we'll also install. And this is just so we can use SCSS and have variables and things like that instead of just plain CSS. We're also going to upgrade our CSS loader to version 3.3.0. So we'll save that and let's run yarn just to install everything. That may take a while depending on whether if you've already got Node.js and its dependencies compiled or not. Then we'll yarn watch. If we scroll up here, you can see yarn watch or npm watch will run Webpack, so we can make sure that all of that is set up properly. Looks like it is. So we will stop this, and then we'll go to our webpack.config.js and close the terminal so we can see a bit more clearly. We need to make a really simple change here. This test matcher, this regex that matches CSS files, we also want to recognize SCSS files, CSS or SCSS, so the S will be optional with that question mark. Then instead of just loading the CSS loader, we'll first run everything through the Sass loader that we just installed. So Sass loader, save that. The order of this is from back to front, so everything will go through the Sass loader, then the CSS loader, and then the default mini CSS extract plugin loader, which we generated with just generating our new Phoenix project. Make sure that we can build everything with Webpack again, no problems. Then we'll cd up a level and we'll run our Phoenix server. So mix phoenix.server, and that way we can kind of keep tabs on things as we tweak them. So we should have our default localhost 4000 there. Now we're going to go to our app.js and change this import from app.css to app.scss. Save that and rename our app.css to app.scss. Then the next step is I'm going to just copy in a few styles or a few colors that I've already extracted from my logo. And we don't need that line anymore. We'll just paste these in here at the top, and we'll set one of them to a body style. So we'll say body background is going to be near black. And is that, yeah, that looks correct, and it looks like it's already worked. Okay, so we know that SCSS is loading and being processed, and all of that is working properly. The next step is the logo. I use Namecheap's free logo maker to make a logo. The way it works is really straightforward. You just start from a logo like that, and then you can start tweaking some colors. It's super easy to use, and it makes sure that you're getting things that are copyright free so that you don't run into any problems for using them on your site. I'll let you explore that on your own. And what I ended up coming up with was this logo. You can see I started from this symbol and then used some gradients and red, green, and black and white, and picked this font. Kind of has a metal look, like a metal band or something. And it's pretty straightforward. I decided to go with the vector version of it, which is this. And then we'll install the font to get the appropriate font. So over here in static images, we've already got a logo for Phoenix framework. We're just going to replace that with this isolated layout logo. And I'm just going to call, actually I'll just leave the name as it is and delete the Phoenix framework one. So going back here, we can see the logo is still loading because it's in static assets. That's fine. And actually, well, let's change this to Reactor Isolated, since Reactor is the name of the logo and the site. So Reactor Isolated. Then we'll go to our main layout, which will be app HTML EEX. And in here, we can see we've got the link to the Phoenix stuff, which we don't really need at the moment. We'll change that to a link to our own podcasts. So let's just delete that, and we'll make another tag, which will be link podcasts to routes.podcasts path con and index. So that new thing will replace get started with something that says podcasts, and it'll go to the index page. We don't have, we haven't closed that. And looks like it's not podcasts path, should be podcast path. Okay, so we've got that, link to podcasts, podcast. Okay, but I actually would prefer that to be podcasts. So I'm going to go to the router and change that to podcasts. And now we should be able to go to podcasts plural. Yeah, that's good. Okay, and the main page is here. We don't need the Phoenix logo anymore. We can use our own logo. So I'm going to change this class from Phoenix logo to just logo, and that's going to require changing some CSS. We'll make that link go to the root path of the app. So yep, that's looking better. And then instead of this being route static path images Phoenix ping, it's going to be reactor isolated.svg. Okay, we're not getting any logo at all now. It may be that we actually needed Phoenix dash logo as a class. Yeah. So now we see the whole thing. I actually don't want it to be Phoenix logo since that's not the class of it. So what we're going to do is we'll just go into our CSS, our phoenix.css file. We'll just scroll down to the Phoenix logo stuff, and we'll copy that into our app.scss. And we'll change the name of that from Phoenix logo to just logo, and probably also make it a little bit smaller. That was a pretty huge one. So we'll just change this max width to 150. Okay, that looks a bit better. Let's actually make the minimum width 100 and the width 150 px. And I believe there's also, yeah, there's a media section here that we'll copy as well. And change this Phoenix logo to just logo. As flex basis, we'll have to go down to 150 as well. Then the next step is we'll make the header black to go with the logo. So let's see, header background color black. And inside the header, we'll make a main title class, which we're not using yet. And we'll set the font color of that to white. And we'll make the font size 10 rem, which will be fairly large. And have to define that up here. So we've got our link is over there, our logo is there, right? And we'll make a span here, main title, and it'll just say reactor. Put that inside the section. That's better. Why is it not white? Why is it invisible? Font color, oh, just color, right. Okay, we've got reactor there. Okay. Now we're going to need a font face, and font face is a pain here. I'm going to have to look some of this up. So in the font that I downloaded, we've got the font file itself, but also a sample style sheet. So it's called Belligerent Madness Regular. We don't need most of these because those are just, I guess I will open it with Mac Vims just so I can look at it on the side. We don't need most of these because they're font formats that we're not using. So we'll just copy all of this in and delete what we don't need. So the font family is that. This source we're not using because we don't have a .dot file. Those are actually pretty old ones. We don't use much anymore. The WAF and the WAF2 are the standards. TrueType is also fairly old. We don't have an SVG for the font, so we'll get rid of that. And in fact, we don't even have a WF2, although that wouldn't be strange to have. We'll delete that and just keep our single source. Actually, we should have two sources. One will be local, so if the person has already got the font, then they can just use it from their own computer instead of re-downloading it. So we'll copy this name into there, and then the URL, I'll let this wrap here. The URL is just belligerentwebfont.woff, except we're in the CSS directory. It's going to be in a font directory, so let's create that directory right now. Fonts. And inside that font directory, it'll be up one level and then fonts. So the URL will be /fonts/belligerentwebfont.woff, and let's copy that in. So copy that to our fonts. And now we need one more thing in our Webpack config. And it's a fairly tough regular expression, so I'm going to go to an article that I've written previously using custom fonts with Phoenix. One of the great things about having a blog is it's kind of like an extra memory. I'm just going to copy this into our Webpack config right after the CSS portion. So you can see we're using a file loader, and that'll just copy the fonts over, and it's going to use the name and the extension. The output path will be one level up from the JavaScript in the fonts directory. And here's the regular expression. Basically, it matches all those file types that are possible for a font, as well as a number of query string parameters you can put after them. We'll save that, and let's see if we have our new font. We do not. Let's go back to the CSS. We need a comma right there. I'll style it like so and save it, and we've got our new font. So that's a bit of progress. Let's go back here, go back to the main page. All right, now I think this background should have been near white instead of near black. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. And we'll make the color not a reactive green, we'll make the color burnt brown. And we'll make our link color link green, naturally enough. Color link green. And I also want to change the color of the buttons. So we don't really have a button there, but if we click new podcast, you'll see we have these various options, and then the save button kind of sticks out a bit. In fact, maybe this near white isn't quite near enough white. So I'm going to change that near white to make it EEE instead of DDD. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Then the green color for the links we're also going to use on the save button. Doing that's a little bit of a pain since everything's already inside Phoenix.css. So the easiest way to do it is actually to wrap all of these. And there's a pretty long section of stuff that's all about buttons. We're just going to copy all of that. So to here, copy all of that into our app.css, put it at the bottom. from Phoenix.css. And all of these colors here that are the bluish color are the same one. We're going to highlight all of these, and actually multi-select doesn't work so well in Vim mode, so we'll toggle out of Vim mode, and there we go, and change all of these to link green. Link green, like so. And our button is now the same sort of green that we have in here and that we have in our logo. Now, as long as we're on our form, let's update that a bit. So podcast form. It's a little bit strange that we have subtitle and title way at the bottom. We'll just drag both of those up to the top. So subtitle and title, like so. And actually title should be above the subtitle. So do that, and audio URL is published. I like to put all the checkboxes at the bottom. Just makes a little bit more sense. Now the notes markdown and notes HTML will return to in a little bit once we set up our markdown conversion. And it's going to be notes markdown that's entered. HTML is going to be the output. So we'll swap those as well. All right, so we've got that moved up a bit. Next thing to do is make sure the height of it's okay. So we're going to open this already created one. You can see these are very narrow. It's not very convenient to edit in there. So what we're going to do is add a set number of rows to each of these. So rows 10, and that's not having any effect yet. So we'll need to add a style for text area, and I think I will make this a base style so it affects everything in the app. It'll be height auto. Much better, but it's a little bit cramped, so we'll add a line height of 1.5. Okay, that looks reasonable. Let's also make the other one rows 10. Yeah, that looks good enough for now. Next step will be on to the show. So the show page is fairly ridiculous right now. We just have all the things in order. Instead of doing that, let's make it so that we've got our title at the top as a title. So we'll just cut that out as so. We don't need to say title. And we'll bring this way up to the top. And instead of show podcast, it's going to be, the title will be in H1. What is this? It's a little bit better. The subtitle was going to go right under it. So we'll drag this out as well. Don't need it to be an LI. Don't need it to say subtitle. Instead, we'll just make this a div. In fact, we'll make it a div with a class. So we'll say div.subtitle and move it inside. Actually, let's make this all one line. Then this H1 should actually have a class too. We'll make that podcast title. Then let's make an enclosing div for the entire thing. We'll call that podcast show. And the entire thing will be inside that, which will make it easier for us to, style the entire show sections as needed. Okay. Now we're going to need some styles for those parts. Before we do that, let's just continue through this list. We'll put is published at the bottom. We're not going to show the markdown notes at all. We're just going to show the HTML. And we're going to need to transform the HTML. For now, we'll just make this raw HTML. Now keep in mind this isn't safe to do with any user entered content, and we're going to have to change this before we set up comments on the site. Now instead of this being a strong, let's make that an H2. And instead of notes.html, we'll just say show notes. And this shouldn't be a list at all. We'll put this up to the top of everything that's left. Actually, we'll pull the audio URL up as well. That's not part of the list. All right. Now we'll get rid of some spaces there, and let's get those tabbed back to where they should be. The next step is this audio URL shouldn't even be printed like this. I'll get rid of this, and now my podcast host is Pinecast, and they have a snippet that you can embed. And so it's just an iframe like this, and this is totally going to depend on whatever your host is, but the URL goes in here. So I put podcast audio URL to get my URL there, and we should see their embeddable player. Looks like that's in the process of happening. Yeah, it'll show it on local. So hit play, and you can hear the first podcast starting. I'll delete this. Now I think we're getting close. We just need a bunch of styling. Later on, of course, this is going to need to be removed from view for normal people. Only admins will see whether something's published or not. If people aren't admins, they won't see it at all. And one thing I want to do immediately is get rid of this big gap here between the podcast title and the subtitle. So we'll add a rule for the podcast title. And yeah, we actually want it right here after the logo. So .podcast title, and that's going to be margin bottom 0. That's a little bit better. And then let's add a class for the subtitle and change the color, make it gray. Color gray. And that looks like a start. Next episode, we'll set up markdown conversion, and we'll add the HTML sanitization I mentioned that we need. And then we'll continue on to more of the podcast pages. Till then, keep on coding.